Hi, I'm Katie Crane, and this is the Pilates Lounge.
Hi everyone, my name's Katie Crane. I'm the Pilates professional. Welcome to another episode of the Pilates Lounge podcast. Now, imagine this. You're in a Pilates class. You feel open, maybe a little bit vulnerable. Maybe this is your first time to the class. Maybe you're learning to trust your instructor and you're looking for somebody to guide you. You've been told that Pilates is something that is amazing for your mind, body, and soul. It can calm the nervous system. It's an inclusive exercise program and it'll make you feel absolutely wonderful. And then halfway through the class, you've got your feet in straps, already feeling pretty vulnerable, legs in the air like you just don't care, feet in the straps, going into your leg circles, and your instructor uses the cue. Imagine a knife being pushed into your vagina to get you to get your pelvic floor working. I'm not joking. This is a cue that was used in a studio in a group of paying clients to help them, in inverted commas, connect their pelvic floor. I want you to take a second to let that sink in. Honestly, just saying the words makes me feel so uncomfortable. This is possibly the worst cue and the most shocking cue that I have ever heard of. Now, believe me, in my 20 years of teaching Pilates, I've heard some pretty wild things being said in the studio. And no doubt about it, I push the envelope myself. Sometimes I say things and afterwards I think, oh my goodness, was that really the right thing to say? Especially if you don't get the reaction that you're looking for. There's nothing worse than saying something that you were hoping to come across as funny or a little bit left of field or something to lighten the mood in the class, and you don't get anybody smiling or anybody laughing. But seriously, to use a cue that brings the image to mind of a woman being tortured in an area that is super sensitive and so private just blows my mind that anybody in their right mind would think that this is A, an appropriate cue to use in public with anyone, and B, a cue that is going to be helping anybody at all. Now, I don't know about you, but when I teach Pilates in our classes, there's all types of people that come to us. But over the years, something that I've really noticed is Pilates tends to lend itself to people who enjoy the calming aspect of it. You know, like you come to a class, you do the work, you do the exercises, physically you feel wonderful, but there's something deeply emotional about a Pilates class as well. And because of that, people that come to Pilates are sometimes or often people who are experiencing stress in their everyday life, and they do Pilates partly as a stress relief. So why on earth would I say something so traumatic? I'm going to say it one more time. Imagine somebody pushing a knife into your vagina. It was something like that. Something about a knife and something about your private parts. Two things that should never come into the conversation in a Pilates class. Full stop. I don't care how hard you have tried to get your clients to understand their pelvic floor. This cueing is never okay. And I thought about this for a few hours before I decided to post a podcast on it, because it actually makes me feel icky just discussing it with you. But if we don't discuss these things, then how do people who don't know any better learn what is appropriate in a class. So today, with this in mind, we're diving into the power of language. In Pilates, how words can wound or heal, break trust or build it. We're going to use psychology. Thinkers, some of my favorite psychologists like Jordan Peterson, Viktor Frankl, a beautiful historic or period romance novelist, Mary Ballow, plus ancient rituals like Chichen Itza to unpack my cues, why cues matter, and how they shape our minds and bodies. Now, this episode isn't just about one bad cue. It's about the responsibility that we have as Pilates professionals to create a safe space, to set a certain standard in our studios, but also to uphold and honor the work of the person who started this. And, not a day goes by that I don't serve my community knowing that I am holding the torch for Joseph and Clara Pilates. And so when we use language, we must remember that we're not just speaking to one person in the room or to a group of people in a class. We are speaking to every single person who's ever going to experience Pilates in the world. And we are speaking for every single person who teaches Pilates in the world. And if we understand the impact of the words that we use or the language that we use, but also the importance of the work that we do, then we would not be flinging around disgusting language like this in a class. And I don't know whether the instructor thought that it was funny, entertaining, helpful, or whatever. I'm not quite sure what was going through this person's mind, but it's embarrassing for us as professionals. It's completely disgusting as far as public speaking is concerned, and it is certainly not doing any favors to anybody in the room. In fact, you're potentially causing very deep psychological harm to some people in that room. So let's discuss how words can shape our reality, or as Jordan Peterson says, words shape reality. So Jordan Peterson, a very well-known psychologist, talks about whether words are ordering chaos or unleashing it. And that knife cue, it is chaotic. There is nothing ordered about it. So that is this chaos that actually shatters the safe space that Pilates should be. When we use language, we want to be making sure that we are always using positive communication, positive framework, encouraging language, empathetic language, warm language, language that gives our clients confidence, and never adding to any stress or trauma that any person in our class may have experienced. So it's important that we understand what is known as trauma-informed psychology. So for somebody with trauma, that particular cue, talking about a knife, could definitely trigger fear, disassociation. It could actually almost lock somebody out of their body. And the beauty of Pilates is that when we teach Pilates well, then we hold space for people. We create a space where people can be vulnerable, because you have to have some sort of vulnerability to actually ever really embody Pilates and what it can offer. And what I mean by that is for us to learn to listen to the whispers that our body is constantly singing to us. I think of when my body speaks to me, it is really singing. And I imagine that that song is very gentle, almost like a lullaby. It's a whisper. But if I don't learn to listen to the lullaby, eventually that song will turn into heavy metal. And the heavy metal song in the body is chaotic. It is pain. It is discomfort. It is sleepless nights. It is fear. It is trauma. It is distrust. It is when we lose ourselves. So when we use appropriate language, then we are in fact opening the door to allow for our clients to find themselves. There is no doubt about it that intuitively we know what our body needs. But when we live in a world of chaos, in a world when there is so many environmental stresses and so many things are telling us all of the bad that is going on. So many things is already shouting us. It's almost like there's so much noise that we actually, a lot of people, they stop being able to even hear their own body. But when we teach Pilates as Pilates practitioners, as Pilates professionals, we have this magical ability to create a space of safety so that people can regain what their body already knows. The body is always working towards what's called homeostasis. The body knows what we need, but we just don't hear it. So when we use language that's inappropriate, that adds fear, that instigates trauma, that is hateful or inappropriate or mean or any of the above, then we shut that door that Pilates should be opening. Pilates is not just exercise. It really is about self-discovery. And I suppose Pilates could become a ritual to some people. It could become the thing that they turn to be able to center themselves, to be guided, to find their breath. If we think of all of the Pilates principles, everything that we talk about in the Pilates principles does inspire people to take control of their body, take control of their health, and ultimately take control of their life. So when we use language that is not helping that cause, then the damage that we do by using words that are not helping could be so damaging, not only for the person, but it's damaging for the entire industry. It just makes me so cranky that somebody could be so thoughtless to use such language. Now, I said that I wanted to touch on some of my favorite psychologists. Viktor Frankl, if you don't know about him, Viktor Frankl survived the Holocaust and he wrote a book called In Search of Meaning. If you haven't read it, it's just an amazing book. So basically, Viktor Frankl lived in a concentration camp during the Holocaust, and he describes in his book that people around him, every day people were dying, and people were dying of sickness, of starvation. But ultimately, he talks about what he saw, that people were dying because they had lost hope. And people lost hope because they did not have a purpose. Pilates people, just quickly, I'm looking for the next best Pilates instructor, a comprehensively trained instructor with at least 2 years experience. You need to be able to teach one-on-ones, semi-privates, individually tailored sessions using all of the equipment. You need to be able to teach a really fun, competitive reformer class, a tower class, and a mat class. Not only that, you need to be super passionate about the Pilates profession, because you would be working alongside me, the Pilates professional, at my studio in sunny Darwin, Australia, the top end of Australia, right up in the tropics, just a hop away from Southeast Asia. A great place to explore not only Australia, but a lot of the rest of the world. If you are this person, then I'd love to hear from you. Katie at thepilatesprofessional.com.au. Now, we're not just any Pilates studio. Not only do we offer both clinical types of Pilates and fitness Pilates, but we also have infrared saunas, ice baths, oxygen therapy, and other therapists working with us. So we are an entire wellness fit out, and we're really looking for the next person to fulfill the position to elevate the studio and really serve our community. So if that's you, no matter where you are in the globe, if you're willing to relocate, we even offer you a 2-bedroom, fully furnished house to get you started, and we can help with visas, but you do need to know whether or not you're eligible either for a holiday working visa in Australia or a 482, a special skills visa in Australia. I can help you with that. If you have any questions, reach out to me if you're really keen and if you're super serious. And of course, if you're a superstar, I can't wait to hear from you. Back to the show. And so when he realized this, and I forget whether he was studying, was already a psychology student when he went to concentration camp, or whether he ended up studying psychology afterwards. I can't remember. But he was noticing that the people that were dying, the people that were truly suffering, were the ones who did not find purpose. And when you read about people who actually go through something so traumatizing as living in a concentration camp and watching people die around them, but still being able to find meaning in that experience and still being able to find purpose and a sense of joy, then I just wonder that we all have that in us. We all have the will to survive in us. And I know that when we teach Pilates, ultimately we're just teaching Pilates. I do get that. But the reality of it is, and actually I was listening to a podcast about biotensegrity the other day, and they also had a couple of guests on who were psychology majors. And there was a discussion, and if you don't know the biotensegrity mob, they're on YouTube and you can follow along with their discussions that they have once a month or so. And it's really based on the biotensegrity model of fascia and of how the body works. And this discussion was about this hypothesis or this understanding that the body is not mechanical. And what that means is that, say, when we're doing arm work, you're not just working the muscles in your arm, because every part of the body, there's no end to the body. So every part of the body, from the tips of the fingers to the tip of the head, to the tip of the toes, to the tips of the elbows, to the tips of the knees, every part of the body is connected to each other, which means that the body is not mechanical, in that you could not just take one piece out. The body is systemic. And so if you take one piece out, or if you changed something in one part of the body, it has a knock-off effect to the entire system of the body. And this is the idea behind the tensegrity model, or the fascial model even, is that the body is a system of pulleys where if we push on one side, then it pulls on another part. If we pull on one side, then it pushes on another part. So if you were, say you were holding a bubble in your hand and the bubble wasn't going to pop, and if you pushed in on one side of the bubble, then the other side of the bubble would bulge out. And then as you stopped pushing into that side of the bubble and the bubble became whole again, the side that had bulged out would come back to its original form. You could push in on any part of the bubble and it's going to have an equal but almost opposite flow-on effect to another part of the bubble. Well, this is how I consider psychology. Psychology is not mechanical. So it's not like the brain just takes something in and downloads that information and then catalogs it or itemizes it. The brain takes that information in, and that information ends up in every single cellular structure in our body, because everything about the body is systemic. There's no one part of the body that is not affected by another part. So when it comes to psychology, the idea is that, or what Viktor Frankl talks about, the idea is that if you have meaning, if you find purpose in life, then you are going to be much healthier in general. So while Pilates is about movement, we know that, there's no doubt about it. The movement that we practice in Pilates has a knock-off effect to our emotional state, our physical state, our immune system, our psychological state, the state of our nervous system, how our heart is working, how our blood is being pumped around the body, how we sleep, what we choose to eat, how we have relationships with other people. The work that we do as Pilates professionals, we must recognize that it has a knockoff effect on somebody's life that is so far-reaching. And I know that I've probably said it before in some of my podcasts, that it's not just this class that somebody is taking on board. It's just not just this class that they're attending. They're attending this class and then they're going out into the world. And I think I've used before the example of then you go to the supermarket and you feel great about yourself. And so you're emitting that energy to other people in the supermarket and they get to take on some of that energy and it elevates them as well. And then if you imagine that there's this trickle effect throughout the entire globe where one person practicing Pilates and having a positive experience has a ripple effect on other people or on every single person around the world. And so the experience that our clients have with us in the moment, on the day, the language that we use, the emotions that our class emits in that person, I can't think of the word, that we are responsible for that. So we either have the option of using inappropriate, poor cueing that would make somebody feel like a victim in their own skin, robbing them of their empowerment that Pilates could promise, or we take on the responsibility and we honor the fact that we can create an experience that then has a positive knockoff effect on 9 billion other people. This is how our cueing can either make or break not only our industry, but humans in general. So with that in mind, I'm going to call out some poor cues that I've heard. And I'm not normally the person who looks at the negative side of things. I'm a cup half full. I'm a cup half full kind of person. I'm not a cup half empty. I'm like, the cup is half full and I'm going out into the world to do whatever I can to overflow the cup. I am an abundant thinker. But I also recognize that to be an abundant thinker, we have to be aware of the dark, of the negativity, of the harm that can be done. So these are some things that maybe we don't want to be saying. Apart from, imagine anybody holding up a knife to any part of your body, regardless of whether it's your vagina or your arm or your throat or your knee, anything. I would never use language that constitutes anything harmful at all. So, for example, if we're thinking about the core, I would never use language like, imagine you're bracing yourself for a punch. Like, you don't need to punch somebody, or lock your joints like a robot, or suck your gut in like you're hiding a secret, or force your body into submission. These aren't just clumsy cues, they're reckless. And trauma research, like there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's written by Bessel van der Kolk. And the book talks about how violent or shaming language can trigger the amygdala, which floods the body with stress. So if you are using these bracing for a punch metaphor, then somebody who has been beaten up before, it brings back that memory, that the metaphor that we use can bring back traumatic memories of what somebody has experienced. And I know that I've discussed it before in other episodes, in my brain episodes. The brain doesn't know what is reality and what is a story. So if we watch a movie, as far as the brain is concerned, and the brain is connected to the central nervous system, or is part of the central nervous system, if you watch a scary movie or a violent movie, or you watch the news and you're watching people suffering, your brain doesn't know that you're just watching an event that you are not taking part in. Your brain takes that information on board as if it is your reality. So if your brain takes in information from your eyes, which is one of your senses, and translates the information that your eyes are seeing, whether or not it's a real event that you are taking part in the moment, or whether you're watching something on television, then that would say that the brain also would take on anything that is being said. So if you're listening to a podcast like you are right now, if you're listening to the radio, if you're listening to somebody speak, then your brain is also taking that information in as if it is happening in the moment. So when we use language, the metaphors that we are using can actually put the body into a stress response just by using that language. So that the knife in your vagina, it is especially egregious. I mean, honestly, the pelvic floor alone is tied to intimacy, birth, and to personal agency. And so invoking violence there isn't just insensitive, it's invasive, it's potentially re-traumatizing. And if we were all using that type of language, I can tell you now that Pilates would end up like some S&M bondage, very, very dark experience, but that's not what Pilates is. Pilates is all about allowing yourself to be vulnerable so that you can learn about yourself. And with that in mind, I'm going to turn to an author that I absolutely love. I started reading Mary Ballow's novels during COVID, when lockdowns were happening, and weren't they the most restrictive, traumatizing experience that a lot of people had ever gone through. We were told never to leave our house, that if you hugged your granny, you were going to kill her. We were told that if you stood up in a restaurant, then you were killing people, but if you sat down in the restaurant, then you were saving lives. I mean, the whole thing was completely illogical, and I'm hoping that people who are listening to this podcast realize now, if you didn't realize it from the get-go, which I can't understand how you didn't realize from the get-go, that everything that we were being told to do was not based on science. Not at all. There was no science behind what we were being told to do, except, actually, I'm going to take that back. The science that was being used was psychological warfare. And it was the psychological warfare, the words that were being used during COVID, of that you were a threat to anybody else's health, and that you were going to kill your neighbor if you spoke to them without a mask on. That has been traumatizing to people. And the people who did not see through the farcity of it all have been traumatized forevermore, unless they actually have come to their senses. But even, I catch a ferry to work, and on the ferry, on the television, they still have this sit 1.8 meters apart from each other. Like, that was never based in science. Sitting 1.8 meters apart from each other was never based on science. Standing on a dot was never going to save anybody's life. But so because all of this ridiculous circus was being played out and so many people were falling for it, I just stepped completely away from society. I couldn't stand even watching people driving their cars with a mask on. So I just stopped going out and I started reading books. And I got into this fantastic author, Mary Ballow. And Mary Ballow, I think she's written over 90 books or something, and she writes these period romance novels. And one of the reasons I started to read them was because I had read Viktor Frankl, I had read a lot of Jordan Peterson. Language has always fascinated me, and I could see that how language was being used on news channels to incite fear. And so I just needed to step away from that. And what I love about Mary Ballow is that she uses language that is intimate, but also honorable, very respectful. And, if you think about period romance novels, so I'm talking like when there's horse and carriages and stuff, she talks in the novels, like the scenes that she sets is all about people who are wounded. So sometimes it was people who had gone away to war and come home, and how they are healed with love, and they are healed through intimacy, and there's a lot of vulnerability, and there's a lot of trust that these characters have to allow for. And it was just my way of escaping the nightmare that I was watching being played out in society, and reading. And I've probably read most of her books. She's got about 90, and some of them are a series, like trilogies and stuff. But I just dove into them, and reading her literature just brought about such a sense of calm and depth and inner knowing that actually really helped me through those really ridiculous times, which ultimately were quite dark times. But when I think about Mary Ballow's novels and the way that she wrote them and how they had such a calming effect on my emotional state. I mean, my husband lost his job because we didn't take that experimental drug that was being forced down people's throats. But so he lost his job. We were relying on the studio to run, to even pay our mortgage and to live. But the studio wasn't going well because everybody was living in fear. And I spent hours and hours reading Mary Ballow's novels because they're so beautifully written in a way that just brings us back to our center, back to traditional values, back to family, back to men being strong and capable and heroic, and women being soft and caring, and the foundation of family. If you have never heard of Mary Ballow and you like a little bit of romance novel, then I definitely recommend it. But I was actually with a reading group, and we were all reading her novels, and then we would discuss them. So it was a nice exit from the circus show that we still seem to be experiencing somewhat. In any way, this whole discussion, this isn't about individual instructors. I want to be very clear on this. This is an industry issue. If people are using cues like that, too often, I mean, don't we already see the media just loves to prioritize shock value, over charisma or responsibility. Like, we know that if we can say something that is really scary, really shocking, that really makes your ears prick up, then it's going to get you to notice it straight away. That isn't what we're meant to be doing in Pilates. What we're meant to be doing is guiding bodies and minds, and careless words really can do harm. And I think that we need to recognize that. So if we discuss if we think about trauma-informed psychology, that the body holds trauma and that words can really reopen wounds. So violent cues are going to disconnect our clients from their bodies, not reconnect. It's not helping anybody. And if we think about Mary Ballow, definitely go read her books. But, we need to protect the vulnerability of a class, not exploit it. And bad cues are going to erode trust, and it's going to leave clients feeling exposed or ashamed. Honestly, the way I see it is people will just leave that studio and people will find another studio, hopefully, or they'll be put off Pilates forevermore. And that would be a real shame because it's not what we're about. And if we think of how Jordan Peterson talks about responsibility, personal responsibility, that I would say that instructors have a moral duty to wield language carefully, and a bad cue is not just a mistake. Like, thought has gone into that cue. It's actually a failure of leadership, and it's a failure as an instructor. If you're using cues that are not trauma-informed, then you are failing as an instructor. So if we think about what cues we could use and how we could actually be empowering people. Like, instead of using a knife, what about if we're thinking specifically about pelvic floor, you feel your pelvic floor switch on simply when you cough. So go ahead and just cough, just a little cough. That engages your pelvic floor. And you can even, if you cough, and then you could elevate a little bit more, that subtle engagement. You could talk about breathing. Take a deep inhale and a heavy sigh. So when you take that heavy sigh, that is your pelvic floor switching on. In a class that I did with my instructors, actually about pregnancy, and this could tie in with the pregnancy episode that I did, we did these different breaths using sound. So let's practice this one now. If you take a deep inhale and then use this, this sound as you exhale. So a deep inhale and then like you're shushing the class, right? Do it again. Deep inhale. And you'll feel that your abdominals or your tummy muscles sink into the body. So that's part of your abdominal structure. That's part of your core structure. Now try with the letter F. Deep inhale. Like F as if you're going to say fudge. It's a different part of your core. You could also use the sound ha. So deep inhale. Do it again. Deep inhale. And then you could use the letter like you're going to say the word snake. So all of those sounds you will feel when you practice them. Ha, sh, s. They all encourage the deep abdominal tone of your pelvic floor. These are simple practices, and they're actually practices that people use when they're singing, but they're practices that I use with my pregnant women just to help them feel their core. I haven't even talked about their vagina at all. Some people in the class, we don't know what has happened to people. So if you're going to use terminology, then I would prefer if I was being taught about a class, and I know that we're all different, but let's be really thoughtful about bringing language into class. I sometimes use bones. So what are the bones of your pelvis doing? So the bones of your pelvis include your sits bones. So you could talk about how, imagine that you're sitting on a bar stool. They're your sits bones that you sit on. So when you're doing something, whether you're squatting or laying on your back with your feet in your straps, feel how your sits bones widen and feel how your sits bones come together. So biomechanically, we're targeting the pelvic floor and the core precisely using functions that we all know. It's fine to use imagery. I think the imagery is amazing. That instead of saying getting punched in the stomach, you could imagine that there's a wide belt around your waist and somebody's pulling that belt from behind you, or you're hugging that belt, or when you're doing a standing roll down, you could imagine that there's a piece of string being pulled through the body to the ceiling, like you're a little puppet being hung from the ceiling. Sometimes I use the cue from the back of the skull or from the crown of the head. Imagine that you're some dried flowers being hung in the cupboard. So you're trying to dry those flowers out. You could use such beautiful language. You could use very positive, quite romantic language. It doesn't have to be romantic, but you could talk about a balloon. You can talk about water. You can talk about a rainbow. You can talk about the sun. You can talk about colors. You can talk about so many different things that are trauma-informed. You could talk about, imagine zipping up your core, zipping up a pair of high-waisted trousers or pants might be a little bit more appropriate for people. If you really want to tap into the elevation of the pelvic floor, maybe you could imagine an elevator. So imagine the base of your pelvic floor, and you're at ground level on the elevator, and then you're going to close the elevator doors and go up one level. What does it feel like to take the elevator of your pelvic floor up one level? Could you go up another level and another level? Play around with different images for sure. Not everybody is going to understand imagery anyway, but when you use it, just be so mindful. Know that you have a responsibility to the people that you're teaching. And I think of cueing is teaching my body, the whispers, like I said, but I'm conversing with the body. I'm not commanding the body. I'm inviting the body to experience something. So it's a gentle conversation. It's a positive conversation. It doesn't have to be all rainbows and buttercups, but we want to try and facilitate intuitive movement. And what I mean by that is we're trying to teach people how to feel into their body. So we're integrating the mind and the muscles. And, cueing can help us feel strong and in control. We need to remember it's not just physical. It's existential. We are giving people a sense of purpose. And realistically, I think that, I don't know. I don't even know what I was going to say, but realistically, I just think that we can do better. So, to wrap this up, I just want to say that words in Pilates are not just instructions. They're really, we are bridging the body, the mind, the spirit, and we are creating a meaningful structure. We are creating purpose in the class. So I just really hope that when we are discussing anything, whether you're having a conversation before the class, after the class, whether you're using cues or conversing within the class, just consider that every single thing that comes out of our mouth is being listened to. There's not a word that you say that somebody isn't picking up on. There isn't a cue that you're using that isn't shaping the reality for a person that you are teaching. So this is a plea to those of you who are teaching Pilates. Choose your words with care and know that every single word that you use has a ripple effect across the world to some of the most vulnerable and the most needy people, and that the words that you use are really shaping the future of the Pilates industry. My name's Katie Crane. I'm the Pilates professional. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be back for you very soon. Have the most beautiful day. Take care. Keep moving. Keep practicing Pilates. Love you out there. But goodbye for now.